So I'm back with a new video and let's talk about a classic horror story. So I'm back with a new horror review and I gotta say I'm pretty stoked to talk to you about this one because this was a surprise. I'm just gonna go straight into it and let you know that this is a Netflix movie, but it's also an Italian horror movie, which is odd and interesting at the same time because the movie does talk about how Italians aren't really fans of horror, so there's not a lot of Italian horror movies, which I have never thought about that. But after hearing the movie talk about it, I started thinking and I realized, yes, I don't think I've ever seen an Italian horror movie, at least not recent ones. Most of the movies are obviously from the US, but I also really enjoy French horror movies, and there's quite a lot of those. But not Italian, so that was interesting. This also stars an actress that I quite enjoy, that you might know from the movie Revenge. I'm talking about Matilda Lutz, but I'm getting too ahead of myself, so let's get into what the movie is about. I gotta say, I went into it not knowing barely anything. I remember watching the trailer and putting it in my to watch list. I really liked the visuals. That's what I remember, and I remember it had some sort of monsters thing. But the basic premise is that 5 carpoolers, so they share a ride. 5 people share a ride to a common destination, but on the way there they have an accident and they all blacked out, and when they come to their senses they realize they're in the middle of nowhere and the road where they were on isn't nowhere near where they are. So yeah, that's what I can say without spoiling because there's a lot. As I said, the movie stars Matilda Lutz, but it also stars Francesco Russo, Peppino Mazzotta, and Will Merrick. I hope I'm pronouncing everyone's name right because they're mostly Italian. So yeah, post that. Let's get into my thoughts. One thing I have to say is that this is not classic at all. Like, it takes inspiration from a ton of classic and modern horror movies. I would say this has a lot of different elements to it, but I would compare this movie to Midsummer. It has a bit of a Midsummer vibes, a bit of Hereditary vibes. The cinematography really reminded me of Gretel and Hansel, and it also reminded me a bit of Antebellum. So it's a weird mix, but once you watch the movie you get why I'm comparing it to all of these movies, because there's a bit of everything. That is something that I really enjoyed about the movie. I mean, overall I really enjoyed it, I'm just gonna say that. But I really liked that they, at first glance, it might look like a convoluted movie because it has so many things in there. It has like gore and monsters and self-aware comedy and also some like horror movie tropes that are they're tropes, like they're kind of cliche, like the group of people in the middle of nowhere and like the monsters. I'm trying not to spoil anything because there's a few reveals which I liked, and for me it wasn't predictable. I can say that there's a few things that I should have noticed but I didn't, so that made for a better like viewing experience, I guess. But I watched this with my dad and my sister and both realized a few things, so it wasn't as surprising for them. They thought it was a bit predictable, so I can see some people thinking that this one is predictable, but it wasn't for me. And I think there's a ton of original things in there, and like just a mix of a lot of things that shouldn't work together, but they work. Something else that I really enjoyed, and I think it's one of the things that make the movie, is the characters. The characters are pretty well established. They look like some stereotypes, but they're not. Once you get into like their personalities and you see more of them, you realize they're not as cliche as they look like they are. And most of all, I just really connected with most of them. Like, you care about basically all the characters, and there's just so much depth put into everyone that I think it's a standout in the movie. Like, sometimes you just don't care, you like the protagonist, but it's not the case here. I liked pretty much all the characters, and that is something that it has to be done right in a movie in order for me to like really care, and I guess they did it right here. Apart from that, the movie also has like great acting. The cinematography is like gorgeous, like it's so me. It has some really like deep reds, and those contrast with the blues. I just really liked the vibe of the movie. It's like so beautiful. I really loved it. And I also loved the score. The score is like haunting but not cliche. And they don't use, for the most part I think, the sound as like the trigger for jump scares. There's not a lot of jump scares either, but there's a few, but they're not triggered by the sound, which is nice. And yeah, I just really like the vibe of the movie overall, like cinematography and score. Yeah, it's so good in like an atmospheric sense. And on top of that, there's also a commentary on Italian culture, and as I was saying in the beginning of the video, like how Italians aren't fans of horror, but I do think this could apply to a lot of other countries, and just like the hypocrisy of people that don't like horror movies but are faced with horror in real life all the time. Again, I'm trying not to spoil anything because there's one pretty cool scene at the end that talks about this topic. At least that's what I thought it was about. There's a lot of like subtext in the movie, and that just elevated everything for me. So in the end, I just really enjoyed this movie, and it was definitely one of my favorites this year, and that is saying a lot. Post that, let's get into my scores. So overall, I give the movie a 4 out of 5. I just really enjoyed the movie. I liked the story, the acting, the cinematography, the score, the commentary. There's just a lot of things that I loved about this movie. So yeah, it was a surprise. Cinematography, I also give it a 4 out of 5. It's just beautiful. And I know it's my taste, but I think a lot of people will appreciate it because it's really beautiful. And originality, I give it a 3.5 out of 5. I mean, I can see some people having issues with it because it has some twists that are a bit predictable, even though they weren't for me, but I can see why people might think they're predictable. But at the same time, I just think the movie incorporates so many elements that, as I said, shouldn't work together, but they do. And I just liked the creativity and just how well everything worked, because yeah, it's a lot and somehow everything makes sense. So yeah guys, these are my thoughts on A Classic Horror Story. I believe the movie is available everywhere on Netflix, so I definitely recommend you watch it. It's a short movie. I mean, it's an hour and 30 minutes, 35 minutes, I think. So it won't take long, and it's just, even if you're not really into the story, at least it's something really beautiful to look at, and it's an easy movie, I would say. Even though it has a lot going on, it's an easy watch, and it's just one of my favorites of the year. So yeah, I recommend you watch it, and if you do, let me know in the comments your thoughts. If you're Italian, let me know like if there's other Italian horror movies, because I would love to watch some, like more recent ones, not like old recent Italian horror movies. And yeah, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not subscribed yet, and I'll see you in my next video.